Today, I'm joined by Kevin Culliney. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you.
You too. Before we kick things off, I just want to thank you today for joining and agreeing to share your story and your time.
Yep, no problem. It's always a pleasure to do with it on fellow journeyers on this unusual and perhaps unwelcome journey for some.
So, when we were previously chatting, I was blown away at your remarkable story. You've endured quite the medical odyssey, and there's really nobody better equipped to recount your story than you. So I'll turn the floor over to you right now with the question, what was the catalyst that started all of this?
That is a great question. Now, my wife, as is perhaps often the case, would be better to identify what was the catalyst for it, because I was largely ignoring some fairly clear signs. And I'm going to take you back a little way. I'm going to take you back to 2016. And what I had was some episodes of involuntary vomiting. I mean, it happened. There was no cause to my mind. So I did go and attend the emergency room and just said, look, guys, this doesn't seem to be right. I don't feel right. They did some sonograms. They did some basic tests. Nothing was identified. And I went away. And then my wife said, okay, well, that was odd. Maybe you need to go and get some more checks. And I said, well, why on earth would I want to do that? You know, I feel fine and everything is good. Then a few months later, the same thing happened again. That time she turned up the heat a bit and said, actually, I think you really do need to go and have this looked at. So I went to see a consultant and they said, well, that is a bit odd. They then did an endoscopy, colonoscopy, had a good look around, nothing showing. I then asked me my doctor's notes, went back home and said, look, clean bill of health, everything is fine, which I got the message. Well, no, it's not. I mean, something happened there. We just haven't identified it yet. I then put my head firmly in the sand and largely ignored it for around about 6 months. And I'm not exaggerating. My wife got pretty persistent and said, look, just go back and see them one more time. It's not quite right. I felt fine, by the way. I'd only had 2 episodes of this, of not feeling terribly well. And it was then that they said, actually, we should send you off to have a CT scan. I had a CT scan, and in October 2017, they identified a mass that was there. I had a bowel resection about a week and a half later, which was very, very successful, and went home actually feeling pretty good and pretty lucky. I then had a telephone conversation, and as you do with these things, I remember exactly where I was, standing outside a light in the street with some light drizzle coming down on an autumn evening in London, and the surgeon said, okay, well, look, it's all very successful. We've done some analysis. We've looked at it. You've got a stage 4. And then after he said that, I didn't really hear much else of what he said until I sort of recovered myself and said, I can't help but notice you said stage 4. That to me sounds pretty serious. And he said, well, it's borderline stage 3, stage 4, but we should now sort of move to the next stage. And the shortish story of that is I went and saw a really lovely oncologist in London, a professor of oncology, really good guy, who put me through 10 sessions I had of chemotherapy. And I must admit, I was perhaps one of the lucky ones. I couldn't even tell you what mix was in that particular bag, but I didn't feel too bad with it. I mean, we all have different side effects. Everyone's story is slightly different. And it was as we got towards the end of those sessions that I went back and had more scans, that, as I described it to a friend of mine, the oncologist, he was a good guy, but he started to sort of look away from me and was talking in very general terms. And I challenged him. I said, look, what do you think the next stage is? And he said, well, it's a difficult one. What I should have mentioned, what I had was cancer of it was in the jejunum, not the duodenum, the jejunum, which is a little offshoot of the bowel. And he said, well, it was in an unusual place. It's been removed, but it has metastasized into the mesentery, which is the bit that really holds all your bowel up. It's all the gubbins in between. That's not necessarily a strict medical term, but it's all of that. So he said, okay, we'll probably try something else. I'll come back to you. And it was during that time that I was lucky enough, again, my wife intervened, because one of her clients has a financial interest. And I'll declare at this stage, I have absolutely zero financial interest in this company I'm about to mention, despite the fact they were brilliant. But he said, you need to go and see these guys. And luckily they were coming to London. It's the company is called Smart Omnica. And two doctors from there came to see me in London and said, okay, we need to have a very serious conversation with you. You need to have some much more in-depth tests. And those tests were then conducted. They asked me to get hold of my tumor, which I swapped one evening with my consultant, handed to me in a little bag and in slides, fortunately. And that was then sent to various laboratories, and there was a period of waiting, during which time something interesting happened, in that my original oncologist said, well, we need to get on with radiotherapy. But because your cancer is dotted all over the mesentery, it's not really accurate, but we're going to do our best to zap it as best we can. And I said, okay, well, that sounds like a good thing to do. The company, which at that stage, my Smart Omnica, was based in Israel. They've now moved, I think, to Latvia in Europe. But they then said, okay, we really don't want you to go and have radiotherapy yet. And the reason we don't is it's going to interfere with some more tests that we want to do on you. I then had what can only be described as a rather robust discussion with my wife, where I claimed that I was absolutely right. And I'm not playing myself down in this. I was utterly stupid throughout this whole process. And I said to her, no, I'm not doing this with what I call the Israeli guy, the Israeli team, Smart Omnica. I'm going to go with my original oncologist. She persuaded me that wasn't the right thing to do. I did some more tests, and a little while later, it was only a couple of months later, they came back and said, actually, we found something which is interesting. And I'll talk a bit more of Smart Omnica maybe in a minute, but what they found were some proteins on my cells that indicated that immunotherapy might be a possible treatment for me. Now, there'd been no mention of that before. The other part of the story I'm missing is they'd asked me to go and work with another specialist oncologist in London, who my original oncologist said, okay, I know who he is. He's a guy called Professor Angus Dalgleish. He said he operates 2 steps away from the mean. If he operated 3 steps away, he might have a problem, but he does things that others don't. And anyway, the short story is, he said this certain type of immunotherapy would work well, or had a good chance. I started that. I had 6 rounds of this immunotherapy. And when they scanned me, and the period of time that elapsed in that was about 4 months, I'm pleased to say that there was no discernible trace of cancer at any metabolic level at all in my body. As you can imagine, one of the best days of my life, and a slightly unreal situation. And I've been under Angus since that time, lots of scans, but that's now nearly 6 years ago, and pleased to say still cancer free.
How common is cancer of the mesentery? I think you call it.
Well, I mean, it had metastasized into the mesentery, so it was actually in the jejunum. So Angus tells me he has dealt with another case, but he's 76 years old and he's been an oncologist for most of his life. So I think as he said, it's pretty rare to have it there. He had a view, and I do tend to trust what this man says, that it probably the cells originally started somewhere else, maybe in the stomach, and then they actually made their way down. He said, because it's a really unusual place to find it. And that was part of his analysis, was it maybe isn't from there. And it was where it was originally formed part of his analysis of what the best treatment for it might be. And that was backed up, I say, by a lot of other tests. If I can just say one thing that was interesting, and this is sort of a headline for my story really, is, and this is no criticism of the original advice I had from my oncologist in London, but in England, they follow very much a protocol, which is kind of the best chance you've got of curing any given type of disease that you might have. But there's a reluctance to move outside of that protocol. And what I didn't really do anything apart from receive the treatment. But what my Israeli team did was they very much looked outside of the normal protocol. They took a much deeper dive into what might be the original cause. They came up with all sorts of things around cooking implements that we used, certain types of cleaning materials that we might be using in the house. They asked for details of all of those, and lots of questions about things that I encounter in my life in terms of doing their analysis. And that did educate where they went to go and try and find a view, because it sounds easy to say, well, they found some proteins on the cells, but you kind of need to have a good idea of what you're looking for. As I understand it, that's the dreadful thing about this disease, is I'll use the word clever for something that I absolutely abhor, but it disguises itself. And part of the trick from an oncology point of view is trying to release that disguise, and that's really what they were able to do. So that was a very long answer to your short question, but it's a very rare place to find it. But as I say, the treatment for it was good and successful.
So this immunotherapy treatment, I'm assuming that was fairly new at the time, 2016, I think you said?
Yeah, 2020. By the time we got there, it was early 2018. Yeah, that we had the treatment. It was new. I think it's fair to say in the US, I think the US is a bit more advanced than the UK in terms of cancer treatment.
So would you fly over for treatments, or did you have to stay in Israel for a little while?
So I did a mixture. So a lot of my tests I would do, and I'd go to various labs and have various samples taken, and then they would send them away. And then I went to Israel twice to actually have more intense tests there, and for them to the scanning they did there was where there were multiple scans that they did, and they started looking at other things, like they went into some of my veins and looking at how they're assembled. It was very detailed. I mean, and again, I really must stress, I have no financial interest in this firm. I just have a bit of an affection for them because of what they did for me. But when you read their website, it's about what they call personalized medicine, and believe me, it's very, very focused, very targeted.
So I actually reviewed their website too. They seem to me to be a little bit of a medical technology company. It seems like they use data-driven and automated methodologies to scan, research, and assess the available treatments, and then adapt it to each patient's particular genetics. I know you just mentioned they uncovered a particular protein, so I'm assuming what they were able to do was unsheath your cancer cells so your own immune system would be able to effectively target it. Is that correct?
If I'd said that, it would have been a much shorter way of putting it. That's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they did. And my T cells were able, I mean, as they said to me, if your immune system can find it, if it can identify cancer, then your immune system can take it out. The difficulty is in actually identifying it in the first place. So that's exactly what they did.
So given London's, I guess, adherence to playing things by the book, I think it's fair to say that you would fall into the always get a second opinion camp.
Very much.
Which factors made the biggest difference for you in terms of your hope and your mental health throughout this process? Was it your doctor himself? Was it the approach that Smart Omnica used, or was it your own belief that you'd make it through this?
Yeah, so that's a great question with a bit of a long answer, but part of it part of it is when, if I look back on it, and again, I'm not being critical of my oncologist, but I was aware, and certainly after the event, I was aware that I was just part of a big system, and I was going through that system. I was very aware of that. There was no discussion about anything that was alternative. And when I met the guys from Smart Omnica, all of a sudden it was a whole world of opportunities was opened up, and a very, very realistic approach of, what you have is a stage 4. It's very rare. We don't have too much data on this, but we've got some data that sits around it that we're going to use to try and help. And I felt immediately that I had people who were focused on me rather than following a protocol. So that was, for me, there was I'd like to say I was very positive throughout. I never thought that this thing was going to get me, rightly or wrongly. So I had a very, very positive attitude. I was very lucky. I didn't really feel unwell during this. And apart from feeling very tired after the immunotherapy, I was pretty lucky with that. I didn't have too many side effects. But I was very positive. And then I did pretty much anything that would support that. So if you'd asked me in 2016 what I thought about using the power of your own mind to help you recover from any illness, I might have nodded at you and smiled, but I probably inside would have been a bit cynical. I couldn't be more opposite now. And the deep meditation that I used to do, picturing what my disease was and how I would actually get rid of it, which I would do very early in the morning, I thought for me was very, very powerful. So I was going into my day feeling actually I'd already started the fight with it. And then I was able to just compartmentalize it and say, okay, I'm doing all I can. I'm genuinely not going to worry about this. Now, of course, every now and again, the devil of paranoia comes up and just sits on your shoulder for a while and talks to you. But I was able to deal with that devil pretty well. And I think those morning meditative sessions for me were really good. I did acupuncture, so I went to Chinese medicine as well. I had acupuncture. Like with all of these things, who knows what works? But for me, mentally, I felt I was taking the fight to my disease. In fact, I never saw it as my disease. For me, it was always an alien that was there, rather than your body trying to destroy itself in the ridiculous way that cancer does. I saw it as an alien presence, and it was something that I was going to get rid of. Almost to the extent when I got the news, it was sort of, okay, yeah, well, I sort of knew that would happen. It's like, I think when it's only quite some time later when you stand back from it, you look at it and go, okay, that was quite something. But Angus has shared many stories about patients that he has, and he's had his fair share of success stories when perhaps things weren't looking so good beforehand. And I'm not saying he's a cure-all for everything, or Smart Omnica are, but that there's something in that, getting your mental state as well prepared as you can, because you've got to live through it. You don't just want to survive through it. I mean, I'm sure you have too. I have quite a number of friends now who are going through different journeys with cancer, but they're going through it, and some of them may well find that their journey is actually going to be 20 years. It depends on what sort of cancer they've got. It could be a very long time. They could be having treatment throughout that time. And to all of them, I said, okay, well, that's it. You've got to live with this, not survive it, and just and make sure your life is really, really good. Not in any false sense, but find a way to just do all you can, and all you can do is all you can do. And that's what I would keep telling myself. And if all you're going to do, once you've done that, then get on with your day and get on with your life and enjoy everything else that comes, and don't let this devil perch for too long on your shoulder.
Beautifully said. Embrace life.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
So you are now in full remission, correct?
I am absolutely. And my last scan was 6 months ago. So far, so good. Um, it's in your mind. Anyone who's been through it, it's always there somewhere. But I hope it doesn't come again. Something gets you right. None of us get out of this alive. But it's not something that I dwell on in the slightest. And again, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to say it. I mean that genuinely, because it's good to talk about it, and it's good to share it with others. And I'm lucky enough to have friends who said, look, do you mind if you have a chat with X or Y? And I've done a few of those, and um, I find them very good conversations to have with people. Um, it's not a club and any of us would choose to join, but if you're in this club, I think there's a camaraderie, if you like, that comes with it, and it's helpful to share as much as you can, and to be as candid as you can with it as well. Everyone's case is different, and that's the reality of it.
So that makes a great segue into my next question. What would you tell somebody who's just setting out on a cancer journey or any difficult journey? Um, yeah, you said embrace life.
Yeah.
What recommendations? What would you say to them?
One, for me personally, some people find it very difficult to talk about it. They internalize it. They don't want people to know, and that's so. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. 'Cause I think everyone has to look at it differently. For me, I was very open, and for me that really helped. Not in a feel sorry for me way, but no, I've got this thing. I'm gonna fight it. Don't sit around feeling sorry for me. This is what I'm doing, and talk about it. And I would always say cancer, the word cancer, because people tend to whisper it. Right? I don't believe in hiding from this enemy. This is an enemy of ours that we want to destroy. So positivity is really important. Keeping an open mind, listening to other people, because you will have a certain view on things which is just going to be yours, and it's created in part by your circumstances. Some others around you might be seeing things that perhaps you don't, and being open to people helping you is a good thing. I complained all the way to acupuncture. I'm not doing that. It's ridiculous. Meditation, why would I do it? I've got other things to do. I'm busy. I'm not getting up at 5:30 in the morning to sit there for an hour and meditate. But in my case, I'm incredibly lucky to have a very, very forceful wife who kind of made me do that. And it worked. And I found a real peace in myself that I probably wouldn't have found on my own. So going to other people in the right way for help and listening is important. And all of that helps the most important thing of all, I think, which is absolute positivity around it. It's nothing is certain in terms of outcome, but you're not going to help yourself, or I said almost not going to help yourself by making it worse. So you can make yourself ill. I believe that. I think we'd all say that certain things do it. Stress is a terrible thing for people, but you can also either make yourself better or very much help make yourself better. So give yourself the best chance by positivity, listening to other people, and then just, as you said, get on with life.
Well said. What's the one thing you would hope people take away from your story today?
Um, yeah, I've sort of thought about that. I mean, to say to people something glib like, well, there's always hope is not strong enough, because there absolutely is. You have the opportunity you hopefully have the opportunity to make a recovery from this thing. And I think just being open-minded and positive is the one thing I would advise anyone to take away from it. But certainly look outside of what you're being told by well-meaning professionals, because understanding how they go about their really, really difficult job, I think, is quite important. They haven't necessarily got all the answers. and it sometimes just pays to look around and certainly get another view on something if things are not looking as good as you would like them to be.
Well, thank you again for just being so candid and open. And you're right. Sharing these stories reduces the stigma.
Yeah,
Saying the word cancer out loud, not
yeah,
keeping it quiet, really helps people that feel alone in this, and it's inclusive of them.
yes.
So I just want to thank you again for not only joining today with your time and your story, but for advocating for cancer awareness and just sharing your positive and incredible story.
Daniel, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky, and I'm very lucky to have this opportunity with you. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.